Welcome back, the Raising Our Vibration podcast, where we explore higher consciousness through spiritual practice. And today we're going to explore intuitive somatic healing with Cindy Garcia. So, just a little background information on Cindy before we get started. Cindy is a licensed marriage and family therapist in private practice since 2004. She completed a fellowship through UMass Boston in infant parent mental health. And Cindy was born with a gift of second sight that aids her in guiding people in deeply transformative healing journeys that allow clients to integrate all parts of self into a more conscious, wise, and loving self. She also utilizes techniques including EMDR and hypnotherapy to assist in facilitating a client's journey. And Cindy employs an integral, somatic-based approach with clients. She guides them to integrate the parts of their being that may be frozen in time so they can transform pain to wisdom and grow into the best version of themselves. So welcome, Cindy. It's such a pleasure and an honor to have you here with us. And we'd like you, if you would, just start out telling us a little bit. I'm really intrigued by this, your mention of second sight. And if you would just start with telling us a little bit about maybe when was the first time you experienced that in your life, and then also how your own life experiences kind of led you into the work that you do now. So welcome, Cindy.
Thank you. Thank you for having me here. So, I actually don't know what it's like to not have second sight. I was born uh, with the ability to see as a little girl, and I've had premonition dreams my whole life. I put myself to sleep as a little girl by watching what looks to me like the aurora borealis moving around and above me when I
Mm,
go to sleep at night in various colors from like deep blues to greens to purples, gold, white. And I still see that to this day. That's how I put myself to sleep still.
mm,
And I have always had visions about world events, people, intuitive knowings about people and things just kind of drop in. Um, when I work with clients, I didn't know how to use this gift at first because I took a traditional training in marriage family therapy, and I was referred a client who had 21 suicide attempts,
mm,
and it was a psychiatrist that referred this person to me and said, everyone else has tried. We know you do something different. Can you help her? And I said, I will absolutely try and I'll do my best. And so when this young lady came to me, she had long blonde hair, blue eyes, and as she was sitting in front of me, she kept shifting. And instead of seeing her, I would see a man with dark hair and a full facial beard, right? Dark eyes. Like, who is this? She hasn't mentioned anyone connected to this being. And I knew it wasn't her mother and it wasn't her father because I had met them. And so, like, over the course of meeting with her, I finally just said, I have the ability to see things that sometimes other people can't see. And when I look at you, I see something in your space, and I'm going to describe in great detail this person to you. And if this has any meaning to you, please let me know. And if it doesn't, you're more than welcome to walk out and never come back. And I understand that, right? Because this might seem a little strange. And so I described this man to her, and she just broke down in tears and said, That is the man that raped me. And I said, Well,
mm,
have you told anyone about this? And she said, No. And then she explained why she hadn't told anyone. And, she had a really valid reason for not telling anyone. And so I had to learn how to incorporate therapeutic techniques from kind of a Western model with this innate vision that I have. And so I learned how to kind of move this being's energy out of her space until I could see her clearly, like until he was no longer a reflection in her space. And so then I just started kind of through trial and error, really watching people because people will shift frequently in session. I can see when people dissociate and leave their bodies if we're talking about a really intense emotional experience that they don't really want to go into. They'll dissociate, and I could see that. They'll become almost see-through as I'm looking at them. And so that has been a really valuable tool for me to track where the work is needed with people. And so I can bring them back to that, gently, and work through kind of these places that I said that are frozen in time, right? Maybe it's an event that happened when they were 5 or 10 or whatever, and integrate those parts of self. And I do that somatically by asking them to either go into that memory and, where do you feel that in your body? And then go in that way. ER, sometimes hypnotherapy to just kind of deeply guide them into these places where we can kind of, work with the wisest part of self to hold and love and bring those parts back into wholeness inside. So that's kind of just one example of how I've been able to use my gift of sight in therapy.
Yeah, powerful, powerful. And maybe could you talk a little bit about growing up with this ability of second sight? Because I could imagine as you grow up, how did, say, your parents or your peers relate to that? And how was that for you growing up?
So my mother also has the ability to see, and my grandmother had the ability to see. So it wasn't so strange for me to be able to see.
Yeah.
I spent many, many, many hours sharing my visions with my grandfather. So he would sit for hours and listen to me talk about whatever was coming up in my visions. And so I always felt accepted. When I started to talk about it with peers, on the other hand, it was a shock to me that other people didn't see in this way because it was so common in my family. People
Right.
would say, what are you talking about? Right? If I've been able to see, like when people pass from this dimension, often they'll come and visit me. Either they'll stand in front of me and they'll look like a holographic see-through form of themselves, or they'll come into my dream time and tell me I'm no longer here and I can validate it the next day, or, that kind of thing. So, yeah. And sometimes people would come and tell me, especially as I got older, like, I'm pregnant, or I'm ill, or I'm going to have a baby, or I'm getting a divorce, or, and so I struggled with, do I tell them? Do I not tell them? The happy things are easy, but to tell someone you came to me and said you have this illness, or you're about to get a divorce, or, something like that. So that was a struggle and still is to this day, because I'm not always sure whether to tell people about the things that they come and tell me. So, yeah.
Fascinating. And just one more question on that tack. How about now? You talked a little bit about how to merge this with your traditional training. And so what about your peers now in the profession? How are they open to this, or is this something you just try kind of keep to with yourself and your clients? What's that like for
Well,
you?
I'm always very open and very honest with everyone now. I wasn't early on because I didn't know how to language what I do, and I still struggle with how to put language around what it is that I do. I've had people ask me to train them, and it's like, how do you train someone in something that you just do, right? Um, so I'm always honest with people that I have this ability and this is how I work with clients. And most people are really receptive, even though they don't always understand. So most of my referrals have been word of mouth for that reason, because they know I work in this specific way. So, yeah.
Beautiful. Yes, beautifully said. I'm just really, I just love what you've shared, Cindy, especially about, passing from grandmother to mother to daughter to that is something that often does run through families. In my own mum's case, she had that site too. So I know, I think a lot of things we inherit ancestrally when we start to look at them, and that's I think that's a real aha for people who both have sight and also people who don't have it, learning how you might acquire that, but also learning that can often be passed down through generations. So one of the things I'm curious about in an intersection point is, I know you've done over the years lots of spiritual practice, and you've been to different ashrams, studied with different teachers. And I'm just wondering, as a support for this, as a support for Second Sight and also for your therapy, what are some of the spiritual practices and teachers that you've come across that you've thought, oh, this is a good match? Because I know I often get approached by people from all over the world who are looking for that kind of foundation for their walk in life, and they're often not sure where to look. And I'm sure you must have some good insight as to what spiritual practices have helped support that, and what teachers might have assisted you as well in the path.
A lot of my teachers have come from within, particularly Kuan Yin. Kuan Yin introduced herself to me in 1995. She came to me in a dream and handed me a ball of light, and just complete whiteout after this handing of the ball of light. And I used to journal in the middle of the night, even if I don't remember journaling, I would. And I wrote, woman, ball of light, medicine bag, healing, and the word JOHREI. And I thought, maybe I can't spell in the middle of the night. Maybe I'm trying to spell jewelry. And I was in the middle of a big move at the time. And I kept feeling this urge to go to a metaphysical bookstore. And so I went and I found a magazine that had the word HOHREI on the back of it and a little ad. So I took it home and I called this number, and this woman said, well, it's misspelled. It's JOHREI. And I said, well, what is that? And she said, it is a form of healing that was given from a man named Meishu Sama, from Kuan Yin to a man named Meishu Sama, and it's to bring divine love to the world. I don't know if you're familiar with it or not, but and so I went and I took this training with this woman, and she did an initiation for us, and the entire room turned golden. It was beautiful, thick golden light, and she stood in front of the room and did this initiation for us. And as I watched her in front of the room, it was like a thousand beings came through her rapid fire, like from every culture. Like it was amazing to witness. And afterwards she told us that we had just had this incredible spiritual initiation, and that we would go through some kind of purification. And I did. And then I left the next day to move from Texas to California. And when I arrived in California, I had that same intuition to go to a metaphysical bookstore. So I asked my sister where one was. So she gave me directions to this place. So she said, I've never been there. So I went there, and it was called Her Place, dedicated to Kuan Yin. I was like, I had never heard of Kuan Yin, and twice, like in 1 week, I'm like exposed to Kuan Yin, right? So she's been incredibly influential internally for me on my path, right? And so I did follow the Joe Ray for a while, which is just basically hands-on healing and kind of attuning to divine love. I have worked with the a Kogi Mama through the Kogi and Kasewa Luna Foundation. There's a Kogi Mama that I have worked with, and I've gone to do clearings with him in Colombia. So working with the fire and kind of doing deep introspection into your life. And they basically say, you go in front of Divine Mother and confess your mess, basically is what it is, and just clear and let go of whatever it is you're holding, at the level of soul. And so that has been like such a blessing for me in my life. And I've traveled this world and gone to many different workshops and studied with many different people. And I at this point, I'm not entirely sure who I would recommend for various reasons. I would recommend you, Stephen, in a heartbeat, right? And I do. I refer my friends and my loved ones to you. Like, you have some of the most beautiful teachings. And recently I was in Egypt, and Shirdi Sai Baba came to me in a vision. So then I went to India, and I went to his ashram there, and I went with Shivananda Swamiji. And at that ashram, I was given a spiritual name. So I kind of went through a pretty big initiation there. And that was beautiful. I got to travel to all these beautiful temples in India and meet these beautifully, like, devoted human beings in India. Their devotion to God, to Divine Mother, is incredible to me. And that in it of itself, even just the beingness of the people of India, was such a profound teaching for me in devotion. And I could just keep going on and on.
It's beautiful. I'm already wrapped up in devotion, and in your devotion. So thank you, Cindy. That's beautiful. I'm going to ask a curious question that's similar to one that Kevin asked, and that is, I work with lots of doctors and therapists and psychotherapists who are all working in the field and perhaps have difficulty bringing their spiritual practice in alignment with, say, their clinical work. How have you found that in terms of bringing, the spiritual practice? How open are perhaps other therapists to bringing spiritual practice into their work?
Yeah, I have primarily been in private practice for most of my career, except like 4 or 5 years ago, I went to a clinic and I interviewed with the woman who owned this clinic, and I just said, this is who I am and this is what I do. I know it's kind of out there, and I don't want to hide, and I just want to let you know that I work in this way. And she said, where have you been? I've been waiting for you. And she was so open. She was a clinical psychologist, and what she did for me was to try to help me wrap language around what I do. So
Beautifully.
Yeah, and I have found, most of the therapists, when I really sit down and talk with them and kind of give them examples of how I work with people, they've been very open.
I really hear you, because I think once you sit and you explain, I think you often find that the other people who have been hiding their element of themselves, in fear of perhaps some sort of repercussion from their certification or their or their clinical practice, actually deep down that they're also supporting the same sort of practice. So I'm curious then to ask about, say, things in your spiritual practice. You've obviously done, being involved with Divine Mother and devotion, you've done lots of prayer and mantra practice or mood practice or all kinds of things. What would you, if for someone listening here, what would you recommend as being practices that you've found particularly helpful? So, for example, when people are facing struggles and they're not sure where to turn, what are some of the spiritual practices you've found that have been particularly helpful for you personally, or additionally for clients, over the years that you've worked with them?
Well, for me, going back to the basics of just deep, what I call Buddha belly breaths, deep breathing to calm the, nervous system in the body. And for me, centering in my heart and, saying particular mantras, whether it's Om Mani Padme Hum or Om Namah Shivaya or just Om, like attuning to my feeling body and just sitting with feelings no matter what it is, like I will, no matter how intense an emotion is inside of me, I will sit in it until it completely dissolves, like until it, like I almost can't remember what I was actually upset about or feeling, right? It's completely gone. And so I also utilize visualization of just visualizing me being held by Divine Mother, Divine Father, and me holding my own inner child, like when I need self-soothing. I have found that really helpful. The blue pearl has been, I see the flashes of, blue light around me all the time. I've seen them for years. And I will ask just for internal guidance, for internal like affirmation. Is this good for me, or is this not good for me? And I will see these flashes of light, and that has been really helpful for me. I am a lucid dreamer, so I practice a lot of lucid dreaming. So when I go to bed at night, if I'm challenged with something, I will have undoubtedly an experience in dream time that will help me resolve or help me understand, something that's occurring in my life. And then the other thing is sitting in my womb, right? And just really allowing my womb to open and speak to me.
Oh, I love that. Thank you. Thank you. I think those will be extremely, extremely helpful, because I do think Kevin and I often, go to this question of what is something really practical that people can do every day at any moment. And I think the deep Buddha belly breath, the way you call it, that's great. That is a real go-to point for people, especially if they can feel. Sometimes we used to say, just put your hands on your belly and breathe there, because we so often forget we're up here in our heads and getting anxious about things. And so, yeah, so look, thank you for sharing all that. So my last question before handing back to Kevin is just in terms of the future and what's unfolding. Your practice, and both personally and also for the public, sounds very exciting indeed. Especially that, as you've mentioned right from the beginning, bringing second sight into therapeutic practice. I think that's an incredibly beautiful gift that you bring to people. Can you tell us about some of the things that might be unfolding, that so people are going to want to reach out to you, especially when they know that you combine, integral somatic practice with second sight? That sounds an incredibly beautiful way to describe an opportunity to find healing for people right now. So what are some of the things that might be unfolding over the next year or few years, and just feeling into that and wanting to empower that opportunity for you and for people who are listening who might want to reach out to you on that basis?
Okay, so, well, I am planning to write a book, and I'm very excited about that, which is just kind of about my own healing journey to liberation, and my own experience of going back through my developmental history and looking at the parts of me that were kind of still frozen in time that needed to be integrated into this here now moment. And a lot of examples of how spirit has really guided me and come to me at so many different points in my life to help me move to the next, stage of my evolution. And there'll be a lot of, tools for people to utilize in their own lives written into that book. And then I'll be teaching workshops as well. And, I would love to begin working with women and, men and women, but I'm beginning with women's circles and going into some of the deeper womb wisdom work and helping women to clear what they're holding in their wombs, because there's a lot of pain on this planet, related to women and what they're holding in their wombs. So I would really love to be of service in that way.
Thank
Beautiful.
you. Thank you. Kevin, I'll pass back to you.
Oh, beautiful. It's just wonderful to hear about your work, and thank you for this amazing service that you're bringing to all of us, and your insights and your wisdom. And if people want to get in touch with you, what's the best way for them to do that?
So the easiest way right now is through my email. So Cindy Garcia MFT at sbcglobal.net.
Okay, great. And we'll put that in the notes underneath the video for this,
Wonderful,
and
wonderful.
in the podcast notes as well. So
Thank
beautiful.
you. And thank you for having me. I appreciate you guys so much. Thank you.
Thank you for being here. It's been wonderful to get to know you a little bit. And once again, just thank you for sharing your work. And thank you, Stephen, for sharing this conversation. And thank you all for listening and watching and participating with us in this podcast. And if you'd like more information on meditation and awareness practices like those we've talked about today, you can visit us at raisingourvibration.net. And we'd love to hear from you there. So until next time, thank you again, Cindy. Thank you, Stephen. And thank you all. Bye for now.
Thank you, Kevin. Thank you, Stephen. Have a good night.